Good evening, everyone. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to a special edition of Burlington and Beyond. Next to me is John Glenn and Pat Moreno. Did I get that right?
That's close.
Two excellent town Republicans, and myself, I'm Larry Way. And next to me is our special guest, Mark Fisher, candidate for governor.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for showing up for joining us on our show. To begin with, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your background. I find it very interesting where you came from.
Sure. I grew up in Westfield, Mass. It's exit 3 on the Pike way out in Western Mass. And my dad went to trade school, and my mom and most of her sisters only went to elementary school. So when I graduated from high school, I didn't go to college, at least not initially. I joined the union, rolled up my sleeves, learned the value of a buck. And there I met a lot of good, hard-working people. And they were raising their families, paying their bills. They could afford a rent or a mortgage, and they were saving for the future. And their blue-collar lifestyle was working for them. It worked for my mom. It worked for my dad. And I had to make a decision, Larry. Is that something that I wanted to do? Or did I want to try something different? And I think this is part of the great joy in life. We find out what gifts and what talents we have, what we like to do, what we do best. And we step forward, we test the waters. We don't always get it right the first or the second time. But it's our pursuit of happiness, not a government-imposed happiness. And so I tested the waters. I went to college, a 2-year community college. And then when I graduated, I transferred to WPI in Worcester, and I eventually got graduate degrees in both engineering and management. Worked as an engineer in Massachusetts, been out of work a number of times, had a number of companies leave the state, close their doors and leave the state. And then I bought a business 5 years ago that's done so well. It's allowed me the chance to do something more than just vote and complain, which has been my political involvement up to this point.
I think that's been a lot of our involvement.
That's right, as Republicans in Massachusetts.
And so what made you decide to want to run for governor, that it was time to do so?
Yeah, two things. One is being frustrated with the slate of candidates that have been put forward for us to vote on. A lot of times I've held my nose and voted for the lesser of two evils. But there's been some times when I've done what 300,000 Republicans did last year, and they didn't come out and vote for Gabriel Gomez. They weren't excited enough to vote for someone who was, had financially supported Barack Obama. And that frustration, given the fact that my business has done so well, it's given me flexibility and some financing to run. And why run for governor and not for some lower state office? I don't want a political career. I don't want to work my way up the ladder. I want to run and show people you can win as a conservative in Massachusetts, and running at a lower level wouldn't have the impact that I'm looking to have.
Interesting.
Mark, you've been tagged as a Tea Party man, and I wonder how you feel about, well, let me put it another way. Why are the basic principles of, that is the principles of the Tea Party follow, how do you find them? Why do you follow them? What does it do to your outlook on government in general?
Sure.
Am I making any sense?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. By the way, your audience should know, if I've been tagged as a Tea Party member, I've tagged myself. I'm proud of the fact that I'm a Tea Party member. And granted, the Tea Party hasn't received the best press from the left-leaning media, but I've got a job to do, and that's to sort of correct that. I think the Tea Party in general is this, that we don't believe that the establishment, whether it be in a political party or a government down in Washington or at the State House, or in the case of the market basket employees, the establishment of a private business is looking out for our best interest, as they should. And so we want to do something about it. Not that the market basket employees would all consider themselves Tea Party members, but it's that spirit. Yes. That we can do something if our elected officials aren't doing it. And that's the spirit of the original Tea Party.
Yeah.
I mean, they acted on their own when government officials wouldn't do the right thing. So basically, that's it in a nutshell.
I'd like to kind of expand on that a little bit because, talking to other people in their own political views, my own analysis of conceptually the Tea Party approach was really just taking care of the people, physical It's not always about fiscal conservatism per se as it is about fiscal responsibility. Watching so much money being, thrown down the drain in so many different ways, and that's really, from my own perspective, how the Tea Party really got kind of its functional start. And, from my point of view, and I think for a lot of our voters, they feel the same way. The government is just wasting money left and right. Taxes continue to go up. There seems to be no responsibility, and everybody in Congress and everybody in the Senate is a multi-millionaire. They go ahead and pass their own insider trading laws where they're absolved for any wrongdoing, where the rest of the population can spend 20 years in jail. I mean, it's just an ongoing issue that, whatever good for you is fine, and we'll pass out as long as we don't do it for ourselves. I'm sure they probably exempt themselves from Obamacare as another interesting example of how they do things. So there's a misconception from my own point of view of what, the Tea Party has really been there and what it stood for. But to delve into that a little bit deeper than not just the Tea Party, but always an interesting point of subject that a lot of the voters are looking at during this election cycle is Obamacare. What impact that has on the mass health system as it exists, and what kind of impact as a governor, do you think you'd be able to have in terms of at least, working some change down in D.C., which is a black hole of things.
I'm going to get to that, how it impacts the state, but regarding the Tea Party, it's interesting. It's an acronym that can be used a couple different ways. T-E-A, taxed enough already, I've heard that used. But somebody also mentioned T, transparency, efficiency, accountability.
Right.
That's what we're looking for in our government officials. And once again, Senator Scott Brown, when he ran in 2010 and won and had backing of the Tea Party, he was going to be the 41st vote in the Senate to stop Obamacare.
Right.
We talked about Obamacare. What happened? Well, they did an end around Scott, and without a single Republican vote, they ramrodded Obamacare down our throats. And I think, ironically, the way they did that gave another rise to the Tea Party. And when Republicans came in the House, Tea Party members, they came in, the constituents told them to do what we told Scott Brown to do, is repeal Obamacare. And so when I've been asked, the Tea Party's kind of harsh, they shut down the government, I respond, no. What they did is they funded all of the government except for that one program, Obamacare, which their constituents sent them to Congress to do.
Right.
And it was the Democrats who shut down the entire government because they didn't get their pet project, Obamacare, funded. But to your question about the state and how does it work in the state, I don't like the idea of any government-run healthcare system, whether it be the one we had prior to Obamacare or Obamacare now. It's a lack of competition. I think competition and free market forces that will keep prices low. When Romneycare was instituted in Massachusetts, our premiums went up. It was supposed to control costs. We paid 15 to 20% more than the rest of the country. And we're finding the same thing with Obamacare. It's supposed to be the Affordable Care Act, and it's not. It's not. So I think this is part and parcel of a government-run program. One last thing. Ironically, this is very ironic, I find. There is an option in Obamacare called the catastrophic care that many young people take for themselves. And I think it's the way to control costs. Like, I use the analogy of car insurance. We use car insurance for catastrophic stuff, collisions or theft or some sort of vandalism, but we don't use it to buy routine things like gas and oil and wiper blades and tune-ups and stuff like that. I think that's the way healthcare should run. Have catastrophic coverage. It's a much lower premium because you're not paying for everything. And then those savings are used by the patients to go in and they decide which doctors or which facilities to go to for routine care. And that competition drives prices lower. Ironically, it's part of Obamacare.
Well, I agree with that concept wholeheartedly, and then use health savings accounts to fund the balance of it, and let them roll it over every year. So if you don't use $2,000 in 1 year, you roll it to 4 or 6, and then you can handle all your fundamental things on a year-to-year basis through your insurance company and have that top piece that's always the part that everybody worries about.
I tell the
There's
story.
some other issues they can deal with, but
I just had an MRI last week on my knee, and I know my deductible, my copay was $50. I have no clue what that cost. Months later, when I get my EOB, explanation of benefits, I'll know what it costs, but I need to know what it costs up front so I can decide, do I go to this one or not to this one? And that's what will happen.
Well, the hard part about medical is even the bill you get won't really define what you knew what the cost was because they're all inflated because they don't know what the insurance payback is going to look like.
Exactly.
I mean, it's just, and they've already done studies about that where depending on the hospital you go to, a hip replacement can be anywhere from $80,000 to $20,000.
So how can we have competition then?
Yeah, so what really is the...
We shouldn't be surprised that prices keep going up and up and up with that kind of a system.
Exactly.
Mark, do you have any thoughts on what's happening at Common Core?
Yeah, I do actually. Actually, I came up at a meeting I was at just to this one. The short story is I will opt Massachusetts out of Common Core like New York, Kentucky, Florida have done, and like the Chicago Teachers Union, the New York Teachers Union, and the head of the Massachusetts Teachers Association, the new president, is against Common Core. My motto is let teachers teach. They know what's best for their students, not a state-imposed program, and certainly not a federal-imposed program, and that's why I'm against it.
It's a disaster. We've already actually had a lot of discussions about this on the show. We've had some very interesting guests in here to discuss that particular concept, and just the more people learn about it, I think the more they realize how disaster it'll be, especially for schools in the greater Massachusetts area where our educational systems are so good to begin with. It'll actually dumb it down.
Exactly. We should be a leader. We should be a leader for the rest of the country, not taking a government-imposed program and dumbing down the Massachusetts high standards that we have.
I just can't stand the idea of the government actually running a common exam all the way across the board, not let alone the fact that they're gathering information. They've been accused of gathering information and holding it. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
No, exactly.
And it's taking more of states' rights, where the federal government is getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and needlessly. I read somewhere, and I hope I read it correctly, that you made the statement about the only technology I'm interested in is something, the end of a cigar that you were going to cut. Do you remember that? Was that? And I didn't know how to take it. Do you recall the statement?
I do recall because I picked up my daughter from Penn State recently, and someone had sent her. I think it was the Globe or the Herald asked these quick questions. Have you ever been to a beach here or this thing? And one of them was, what's your favorite piece of technology? And I said, a well-made cigar cutter. And my daughter had received that from someone.
I couldn't quite fit it into your whole program.
It's a very well-made cigar cutter.
Mark, we're very glad that you're running. The fact that we now have a choice in the primary, and that's just a little bit of alert to all Republicans, independents out there, that Republicans are having a very good primary. I hope we all participate. And I, for one, support Mark Fisher.
I do too.
Thank you. John Glenn's neutral right now.
Which is fine.
Which is fine, yes. But we'll have a decision, I'm sure, by the 9th, right?
Of course, yeah.
But I was wondering if you understand a little bit positive. Could you get into your 4-point plan that makes the state more business friendly?
Sure.
What does the state need to do?
Yeah, I think that's
not going to be a disaster like many other programs they've gotten into.
Pretty common sense stuff. I think that Massachusetts needs to be business friendly, and it's not. I said earlier, 4 of my previous employers have closed their doors and not gone out of business. They've gone out of state because it's easy for them to do business out of state. We haven't had a new net job in the last decade or so. We need to make Massachusetts business friendly. Take people off the dole. The number of people on food stamps has doubled under the ball pattern, from 450,000 to 900,000. How do we make Massachusetts business friendly? 4 simple steps. We reduce the corporate tax rate and make it comparable with those states which were driving out businesses. And ironically enough, New York, liberal New York, is second now among the 50 states in job creation. Because they're doing a very simple thing. They've created 0 tax zones, and they're inviting businesses in to take advantage of them. Very conservative, free market type of thing to do.
Global Foundry is a good example up in Albany or up in Saratoga area.
Exactly. And they're second among the states in job creation. So we do the similar thing here. We're in competition with other states to attract businesses in. We have to make it business friendly. The second thing is we eliminate the overburdensome rules and regulations. I'll just give you one quick example. A good friend of mine owns a machine shop, and a year ago he moved into a brand new facility, and he was visited by the Department of Environmental Protection, and he received a fine of $7,000, and it was because The sign that he had on his wall that said hazardous material should have said hazardous waste.
Oh, you're kidding.
And rather than give him the 30 seconds to change it, they fine him $7,000. It's story like this after story like this that push businesses out and keep businesses from coming in. Thirdly,
That's a state EPA group, not the federal?
state.
Part of Florida.
Yeah. And then thirdly, we stopped the taxpayer funding of fad industries. And what I mean by that is Evergreen Solar in Devens. They took 58 million taxpayer dollars, and in just 2 years they closed their doors, moved to China, and 800 people lost their jobs. Lastly, we eliminate the obscure inventory tax. Only about 7 or 8 states have it. I have to pay it as a manufacturer. But what it does, it keeps big distribution centers out of Massachusetts who would love to take advantage of our central location in New England. Think about this, you've heard the old adage, location in real estate. So here we are in Massachusetts, 3 states to our north, 2 to our south, New York is to our left, and I always want to keep New York to the left of Massachusetts. But if we eliminate the inventory tax, these distribution centers will come here and they will bring with them good paying jobs, material handling jobs, logistics jobs, administrative jobs, and transportation jobs. It's a no-brainer. We can do in Massachusetts what Governor Scott Walker has done in the blue state of Wisconsin, where in just 3 short years, he turned tens of billions of dollars in deficits into a $1 billion surplus.
Wow.
Oh yeah, politics, the right programs and the right regulation policies, not to say I'm anti-environmental or anything else, because I'm not, but there's got to be some logic in it and how it's approached, and it just can't be burdensome to the point where people say, I'll go somewhere else to do this because this is just over the top. You see that all the time in the state.
Where would you say that you and your opponent differ on what are the sharpest contrasts that you would have?
This is only an hour-long show, right?
That's correct.
Oh my goodness.
Top 3.
Top 3. It's funny because back in March of this year, Deval Patrick called Charlie his identical twin. And he listed a number of things. Real quickly, they both believe that healthcare should be a right. They think that pressing issues of the day are climate change, income inequality, the government involvement with minimum wage, stricter gun control. They both share the same view on illegal immigration, and neither one of them has taken the no new tax pledge, like I have, like Governor Bill Weld did, like Governor Paul Cellucci did repeatedly. So that's the short list.
Charlie Baker's in favor of all that you just mentioned?
All that you just mentioned, and I'm on the other side of that. He agrees with the ball on all of those issues.
Now, how about the current illegal immigration issues? Were you opposed to bringing that to Massachusetts?
Yeah, I'm opposed not only to the additional ones, I'm opposed to over 220,000 that are here now. And Larry, I've said this not only just recently, but when I kicked off in December, illegal immigration, unlike Martha Coakley, illegal immigration is illegal. And how do we solve it? The typical bureaucratic way of solving this would be create another government bureaucracy, hire more people, hunt down the illegals, arrest them, and then hope that the federal government deports them. I'm not talking about that at all. I said from December, well, what do? We just cut off the benefits. That's why they're here. Massachusetts gives out more benefits to legal immigrants than all of the other New England states combined. That's why they're here. So we turn off the benefits, and they won't self-deport to their home countries. They will self-deport to the next big blue sanctuary state, whether it be New York or California. Surprising.
And they're bankrupting the state?
They're bankrupting the states. We know this because just listen to the mayors of our cities and towns. Judy Kennedy and Lynn is saying this. And the mayor of North Adams, Martha Coakley's hometown, is saying they're on the verge of becoming Detroit. The solution of cutting off the benefits has been used only just recently, in the last few months, by Maine's Governor LePage, Tea Party Governor LePage.
Yeah.
He started doing it. The thing I don't like about it is they're leaving Maine and they're coming to Massachusetts.
Yeah, and people don't really grasp it's the housing, it's the 12 years of education with no tax support. I mean, it's just the food stamps, the expense associated with it is incredible for the public sector to support. In the private sector, the only way to support it is either real estate taxes.
That's right.
Federal government is what, going to pour millions of dollars into the state to support it? Any way you look at it, the taxpayer across the board is the one that's getting severely impacted by this, but they don't necessarily see all of it until you look at the $500+ billion deficit we're running. So, it sounds like you've got a reasonable solution there. Maybe you can get together with the Texas governor and several others down there and see if they can do something about the border.
John, the most surprising thing in the campaign about this, people will criticize us conservatives for being not compassionate in this issue and so forth and so on. We are. I mean, we
That's
already
not
have
accurate,
220,000 here. But the surprising thing is, about a week and a half ago, I was at Rosie's Place, shelter in Boston for homeless women. And I always talk about illegal immigration. I always talk about EBT card reform in my traditional stump speech. I didn't get a chance to say it myself because the 150 women that were in the audience, they asked me first, what are you going to do about illegal immigrants? They're coming here, they're taking our beds, they're cutting in line, they're taking our services. And as I was answering that question, another woman said, and what about these 1,000 dead people that are getting EBT cards? So it's not a right-wing, zealot, conservative Tea Party. The effects of these things are having the effect on homeless women.
On our own poor.
Exactly. On our own poor.
It's hurting our own poor.
Poor, homeless, our veterans aren't getting the care they need, and we're giving it to
People
legal
that don't,
immigrants.
people that don't.
I should say, I have a small business, just 8 employees, 2 of whom are immigrants. They've come here legally. They have their green cards. And a fellow from Brazil just told me 2 weeks ago he passed his citizenship test, and he's waiting to hear where he has to go to take his oath of citizenship. So I hope to be with him when that happens.
Well, that's terrific. And we allow something like 1.8 million people to become citizens on an annualized basis. It's not like there's some kind of door completely closed for people coming to this country. There's just a way to do it.
Exactly.
And pouring over the border illegally is not for an industrialized nation like the United States. It's just, I don't think any industrialized nation in the world would allow that to occur.
Why is it important to have two-party system in any state?
Yeah, well, look what's happened with the patronage scandal in the probation department. It's funny. When that question comes up, I liken what happened with the recent tax increases. The legislature put forward a tax package that Governor Patrick didn't think was big enough, so he vetoed it. And the legislature, because they have overwhelming support, overrode their own Democrat governors and pushed it through. Because of one-party rule, we're along for the ride. I mean, think about, we're not talking about narrow margins. We have 40 senators, 36 of whom are Democrats, 36 out of 40, 160 representatives, 131 of whom are Democrats. Republicans are along for the ride in this state, and so you're going to get just one side of the thing. Even if we were to raise a vocal argument, that's all it is. There's nothing we can do with voting in the legislature to stop the Democrat machine. And they've had this majority in both houses since the 1960s. And I tell people this, back in the 1960s, when they first took over, we had 12 congressional seats down in Washington. And what's happened? Because of what they've done, pushing population out of Massachusetts, and our representation is based on population with the census, right. We've gone from 12 seats down to 11, from 11 to 10, with the result of the most recent census, 10 to 9. Yeah. Massachusetts is losing influence on a national level because of these policies of the Democrats, one-party rule.
So with all the scandals of the current administration, we can talk about the missing children in DCF, or talk about compound Senate drug lab. I mean, just to sit down and there's a new scandal of the month almost. Yeah. What is happening in the state, and how would you go about correcting that? What is there to be done?
Great question. Not only the scandals themselves, but how they've been dealt with. The head of BCAT took a while, and Governor Patrick finally accepted her resignation. But I consider it a promotion because she now serves as a consultant to that organization with the same pay. This is not, a resignation. This is not taking accountability for your problems, sort of promoting it. Now she's going to be counseling people and doing the same sort of thing. That's a whole separate issue. I just wanted to bring that out. I tend to group these things together. You mentioned DCF, the compounding pharmacy scandal, and the drug lab scandal. And here's the solution. Common sense, no cost to the taxpayers. The heads of these organizations, when the scandals hit, their common response was this. These are big organizations, and these scandals happen deep down inside, and we didn't know about them until they bubbled up. Okay, well, I don't necessarily accept that, but here's the solution to it. My wife is a teacher in the Worcester Public Schools, and she, along with firefighters and police officers, are mandated reporters of child abuse. I would say for all government employees, they would be mandated reporters not of child abuse, but of any kind of fraud, abuse, scandal, or procedural errors or deficiencies that don't allow them to do their jobs. Concrete example, Annie Dugan at the drug lab. Her co-workers knew that she couldn't be doing the amount of work that she said she was doing, but they didn't say anything. We need to give them whistleblower protection and mandate them to go outside the organization, either to the media or to law enforcement, that'll nip the problem small in the bud and bring it to the surface so we can deal with it.
Is this because we don't have effective managers at the various levels? And would you have replaced some of the managers that were apparently kept on or promoted, as you mentioned?
You know, it's funny. Take, for example, the BCF scandal. The workers and the immediate supervisors lied about going into the home of Jeremiah Oliver, the small boy who was murdered. They should have been fired immediately, and then quickly they were. And depending on the nature of the problem, the head of the DCF was eventually, the resignation was accepted, I think probably a little too late. But then again, resignation should mean resignation. It shouldn't be promotion and given a consultancy job at the same pay. I think you're right, Larry. I think a lot of these managers are put in because they've helped out campaigns in the past, they've been big donors to campaigns, and it's political patronage.
In fact, I think we know some of that.
That was going to be my point. How much
Absolutely.
does patronage play in the hierarchy of our state government?
It's huge. And I don't mind the fact that if you know someone and they work in your campaign, that maybe they don't get a seat at the table, get an interview for the job. But based on this recent scandal with probation, they didn't just get a seat at the table for an interview. I mean, they got the job because who they knew. And this isn't right. It's not right.
Without any background to fit into the role.
Exactly.
That part's always hard to believe.
Well-paying jobs, too.
So at this point, what's your plan to win on the 9th? I see that you do a very busy calendar.
Oh, yeah, by the way, maybe it's a little bit too early, but my campaign website is markfisher2014.com. And on the website, not only are there an issues tab, about 14 or 15 issues, people can find out where I stand on those particular issues, but also my events tab has my full campaign schedule, where I've been, where I plan on going. And to win is simple. I mean, we need to turn out those people who didn't vote the 300,000 for Gabriel Gomez.
Stayed home.
Exactly. We're expecting in the primary, give or take, around 200,000 people. A little bit less, maybe a little bit more. And I've got a whole body, 300,000 of them that haven't voted. I've got to turn those people out. Strangely enough, Boston Globe ran a poll about 2 months ago now, and they asked the question, do you consider yourself a member of the Tea Party? And even the pollsters were surprised with the numbers that came back. It was 14%. 14% doesn't sound like a lot, but when you compare it to the membership of the Republican Party, it's 11%. So if I can turn out those Tea Party members, I've got more than the Republican base. I'm feeling pretty good about that.
Good.
Getting back into some other generic questions
Yeah.
around the state too, some of the some of the more community-oriented issues, but one of the big issues in our town is the funding that's come out of the state, to support the towns that basically came out of the lottery, and that number has been dropping, for a decade. And it seems like that's not going to change a whole lot. Do you see in your role being able to kind of turn some of those things around with more support, because there's a lot of demands that are put in the school systems that are mandated, that are fairly expensive, and do you see this the ability of at the governor's level to be able to help the towns a little bit more effectively? Because from my perspective, it seems like all the money goes to Boston, everybody else is kind of on the outs looking in.
A couple things, actually. Certainly jobs. If we boost the economy, the tax revenues that come from additional payroll taxes go to Boston. We can help out local communities that way. But also, this is a big thing, illegal immigration. Those 220,000 that are here now, again, for the moment, let's forget about any more that might be coming as a result of some sort of partial amnesty that President Obama is talking about. Massachusetts taxpayers spend $2 billion a year on services for illegals. So if we cut off the benefits and they go outside of Massachusetts, that's $2 billion. You divide that by the 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts, it's over $5 million in local aid. $5 million in local aid, just that. Now, the school population, last numbers that we have, student enrollment was up only about 1,000. But last year we have numbers to the current year. 1,000 students.
Statewide.
Statewide. Well, if you take illegal immigrants out of the picture, those numbers are going down.
Yeah.
And there could be cost savings to local communities as well. So those three things can help out local communities.
Well, that's interesting information that nobody knows.
It's getting out the message.
Yeah. Well, that's key.
Nobody knows it, but they're feeling it. Their pocketbooks
yeah.
feel it, and they don't know why.
You know, the property tax rates keep on going up,
Exactly.
up for all the towns, you know, and it's not really a reflection necessarily of the valuation of homes and stuff. And you know, it's just, you know, at some point there's a breaking point because incomes aren't getting better and it's been stagnant for a decade.
Exactly.
And government's demand for resources and revenues doesn't seem to change much. And you know, at some point in time, the rock starts bleeding water. Something else needs to be fixed. You brought up a bunch of things about development and your competition, if you will. And I thought that was kind of interesting. You think climate change and some of those other issues will be a debate issue at the governor's level?
It's a funny thing. I mean, it came up. We had a forum back on June 2nd, and it came up. The question was asked, and 4 years ago, when it was asked, the Republican nominee didn't want to have climate change be part of the issue, and wasn't a believer in it. Now he is, agreeing with the ball. I'm an engineer. I'm licensed as a professional engineer in Massachusetts. I have an open mind. I like the scientific method. I think it's a great thing.
I haven't seen much of that in that debate yet.
But here's the thing. One of those 15 items that I have on my website for issues is climate change and the environment. I was in high school back in the 70s, and we were told, warned about the coming ice age.
Agreed.
And on my website, when you go to the climate change tab, I have a picture of a Time magazine cover art, and it has, you know, beware of coming ice age. And then next to that is beware of the global warming.
Exactly.
Which, by the way, if you listen to climatologists now, climate change is the word. They've gone away from global warming because they say over the last 17 years, it hasn't been in it. So what I say is this. Once they get something right, you know, is it cooling? Is it warming? Are the polar bear population really decreasing? No, they're increasing.
No, they're lying about that. I know.
2015 was supposed to be the year when the Himalayan ice was going to melt. I mean, once they get something right, I've got an open mind. I'll listen to that sort of thing. But here's the thing now. Well, how has it played out? Governor Patrick has created a new position, climatologist.
I know.
It's a 6-figure position. It's not going to exist under a Fisher administration.
You know what bothers me about that argument is the debate, quote unquote, is over. And when the debate goes away for what should be a purely scientific discussion, and there are so many impacts of climate change, I immediately say something's extraordinarily wrong about this discussion, and has been for a long period of time, because there were a lot of articles from a lot of really bright people saying that, you know, the jury's out. There's just not nearly enough information to ascertain what's the truth and what isn't. So, you know, but some people are just dogmatic that it's all about the environment. And I am an environmentalist. I mean, I like clean water.
Yes.
You know, you want to make sure that we take care of our BCAT sites and that our population is healthy. But you also need some science behind what you do as well.
There are 3 links that I have under that issue on my website. The one that I like the best is isthereglobalwarming.com, and it's very substantial about what, you know, the counter arguments against what's normally put out to people. But I think the scientists and the science have allowed themselves to become politicized, and they're driven by the money for their research. Same thing with Common Core. That got put in place. Schools are looking for money. Take this money. All you have to do is accept this program.
Population didn't know anything about it.
Exactly.
Who was it, Governor Jindal, I think, who just recently told them to keep their money, told the government $4 million.
Well, that's how
He
the
opted out.
federal government was essentially bribing all the
Buying
states.
it
Bribing the states
with
to
our
buy the
money.
program.
As part of the stimulus package,
Yeah, we had an excellent program,
which
here,
is
as I
now-
mentioned earlier.
Wonderful.
which is now extinguished. That particular fund. So Mark, how do we roll back the role of government, the reach of government? Because every year it seems to be expanding, going a little bit more and coming at us a little bit more again. both tax-wise and with new regulations. How do we set up a culture that says enough and then roll that back?
It's interesting. I remember when President Obama was elected, some of the political analysts said that the time is over for when Ronald Reagan used to say that government is the problem, not the solution. And now with Obama, they say the government is the solution, not the problem.
Not the problem.
And I remember being at a Republican event and talking with people, and a fellow came up to me, a Republican, and said, okay, so if you win, what are you going to do for me? And I was taken aback by it, just like you are, John. I was taken aback by that because I thought, you're supposed to be Republican. And I said, I'm going to try to give you back as much money as we've taken from you, and you get to decide what's best for you. And the fellow that was standing next to me said, yeah, don't you remember what Kennedy said? Ask not what your country can do for you, you know. So I think, you know, we let people take back the money that we've taken from them. We look at areas in government. I think under the ball there's been an increase in either 10,000 or more government positions and government jobs, patronage jobs. My best example of this is the Turnpike. We were promised that when it was paid for, and it's been paid for almost 30 years now. All the billboards and the rest stops and the food eateries and the gas stations, all that revenue that comes in more than pays for the maintenance and then generates $20 million in excess each and every year. It's a great example. No, it won't, but that's where a lot of that money's going towards. But it's a great example of a self-sustaining project. So why do we have the tolls? They're patronage jobs. The average toll taker makes $80,000 a year, and with overtime, $130,000 a year. This is a government. You know, we bring in people who've helped us out, and it's one-party rule. It's the Democrats only, and it's used to reward people who helped you out in your campaigns. And it's not helping the taxpayer.
So the Turnpike is definitely one area we could look at.
Absolutely.
Where you wouldn't be afraid to take an axe to it or possibly start to downsize its
Well,
staff.
the problem they have now, though, is the Big Dig is such a incredible black hole. That was, you want to talk about patronage jobs, that one's job that never stopped giving, and they owe, the state owes what, how many billions? $15 billion to pay back over the course of the next 30 years, so those tolls aren't going away.
Are there any other areas of state government that you feel could use, I don't want to say a haircut, but...
Well, there are a number of, they're called secretariats under the executive branch that I can deal with directly. And there are others that I'm going to have to deal with the legislature on as well. But we'll take a look at each and every one of them. And for example, under the Department of Transportation, there's another subgroup that deals with highway safety. And part of what they put out are these called public service announcements, some of the billboards. And some of them were just laughable. Last winter, there was an electronic billboard, and I don't know what it cost, maybe $5,000 a month for a billboard, something like this. And it said, reduce windshield glare. Use your sunglasses, use your visor, and use your windshield washer spray. I mean, do we need the government to be telling us these things?
It's like when President Obama with his program to, what was it? He put a lot of money in. Anyway, they put sign. I can't think of the title of it, but they had signs all over the country.
From the stimulus.
Yes.
Your money at work.
Yes.
Signs, remember those?
And the signs were expensive, very expensive, and waste of money, absolute waste of money. I like the idea of controlling immigration. That $2 billion that you talked about is serious money, and I think that could help produce a new atmosphere. It's just really significant. And how do you feel about the election?
I feel pretty good. The numbers we were talking about earlier, there are some wildly different polls, and if I believe some, I think we have a very, very good chance. I believe the other ones, which are at odds with it, tells a different story. So it's interesting to see. They're not in sync yet, and maybe as things tighten up, we'll see a convergence of these different polls. But
I don't understand how people don't see that Mr. Baker is so close in policy and outlook with what has been going on. I mean, he's not that, I don't know, is he a rhino? I don't.
Well, he is, but, you know, I can answer that question, but I'll let you do it.
I'll let you use that term, but it's interesting, I told this to Charlie in the debate, 4 years ago, he got it right. He talked about Massachusetts being in a mess. And he adopted his 5-5-5 plan, which I have now. We reduced the corporate tax rate to 5%, the sales tax and the income tax back to 5%. He doesn't talk about that anymore. He took the no new tax pledge 4 years ago.
And I liked him 4 years ago, but everything he's talked about recently has.
And then here's the thing. I think what's happened, there is a whole class of Republicans out there, the consultant class, and I think they've said they used it with Carrie Healy when she ran against Deval Patrick the first time. They're too harsh. They're too harsh. I don't think they're harsh enough. I mean, what I've said is the Democrats own the state. That means they own all the problems. They just won't own up to them. We need to pin these problems to them. But this consultant class says no. So when Charlie kicked off last fall, rather than saying Massachusetts is a mess, he's on record as saying Massachusetts is fine. Well, then what do we need to change for?
Exactly right.
What do we need to change
He's
for?
completely wrong. I mean, when you look at the underemployed in this state, the unemployment, the number of jobs that have moved from here west and south, I mean, to me, it's, and with the finest universities on the planet, it makes no sense.
So a lot of the campaign has been done, and again, I blame this on the consultant class. They talk about very general ideas. You know, let's be great, and we want to do this, we want to do that. In general, we want to be transparent in healthcare. They talk about specific issues and proposals, and on Common Core, Charlie makes a great point. He said, you know, 4 years ago, he was the only one and the first one to testify against it at the State House. And he should put a period there. But he doesn't. But he says, well, it's accepted now in Massachusetts. I want to see how it plays out. If it's good for students, we'll keep it. If it's bad, we'll get rid of it. But then you're experimenting with it, and the kids are the guinea pigs.
And the problem is, once the government program takes shape, the chances of getting rid of it are, you know, below slim to none.
Exactly.
Virtually impossible.
Exactly.
I heard that comment recently, and that is, let's see what happens with the first test, or let's see what happens when they're tested, how the tests work out.
And so how does that group of kids do in their first year of college, because they're the guinea pigs?
Right.
And what price do you pay?
But what price do you pay? The interesting thing is, if this was in the state of Massachusetts, there might be some legitimacy to that argument, but it's just playing out statewide, nationwide. And like I said, New York, Kentucky, Florida, perhaps even Indiana now, Iowa have opted out. And teachers are against it. Teachers' unions are
Once
against
they
it.
know about it. I mean,
Once they know about it.
this has been such an under-the-radar
Should be a no-brainer.
program.
Should be a no-brainer for
But-
any politician.
And
But,
it's just, the more sun comes to light on this program, the more people realize what a disaster it is.
one of our debates with John Keller, WBZ, Charlie repeatedly said he's after 100% of the vote. Well, to get 100% of the vote, first, it's against the wisdom of Lincoln. You can't please all the people all the time.
Quite right.
But to get 100% of the vote, you have to take both sides of every issue. I mean, come on.
It's hard to do.
Let me see that. He's against Common Core, but he's not going to get rid of it.
Exactly,
He's
exactly.
going to try and work with it. He's going to try and reform it.
Exactly.
So that's,
Oh, go ahead.
well, I'm sorry to hear that, because he sounded like initially, when you listen to him initially, it sounds like he's so much against it. And then my follow-up question was, great, so does that mean you'll get rid of it?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Exactly. Exactly.
So when you dig a little deeper, you find out that's going to be pretty much business as usual.
You know, it's an amazing thing, Larry. With Mitt Romney, when he ran against Barack Obama, in the second debate, I don't know if you remember this, in the second debate, he came out swinging. I mean, he had the right approach. And then he backed down in the third debate. I mean, that's just what I think we have to do. We don't win by surrendering and adopting Democrat positions. We win by fighting. And he had that fighting spirit, but only for the second debate.
Then he started listening to the consultants.
Exactly.
Well, I agree with that.
Exactly.
Our platforms are right.
Yeah.
Our platforms make sense. What we try to do is the greatest good for the greatest number of people, for all of the people, actually. I don't know.
It's worked in Wisconsin, it's worked in New Mexico. What I've said is, listen, there's this whole idea out there about the Big Ten, and I say, I don't like it because it's pandering. You try to please all the people all the time. I believe in the full platform theory, which we try to appeal to everyone, right? Knowing full well we can't please everyone, but I think we've got the right message, and it will resonate in the minds and hearts of the majority of people. here's the thing. Scott Walker, a Republican in a blue state that went for Obama, was elected. The unions poured in millions of dollars to get him recalled, but when he won the recall, the only governor to ever survive a recall, by the way, he won it by a greater margin of votes and a greater percentage of votes, which means the Democrats were voting for him because they liked what he did. They liked the full platform.
Yeah, because even if you have, more liberal roots, you still want to see your state fiscally capable of surviving.
Exactly.
And that state was going in really very, very, difficult direction.
And Massachusetts has elected, obviously, it's elected Republican governors in the past, and I think we're at a tipping point again where they're looking for something different, and they're not going to get it in Copley or Grossman or Burlington. It's a great time to be a Republican in Massachusetts. If you run as one,
Here's something that's under the radar screen for a lot of people, and it's a real problem for a lot of communities, and that's unfunded mandates that the states are somewhat involved with in terms of how they write the laws, in terms of how they get funded and stuff. But it's a problem that exists. It's a big problem in Massachusetts, probably similar in California, some of the other states. But I mean, the fiscal disaster on the horizon, if they're not addressed, is enormous. In this town, it's probably $120, $125 million, and that's in every community pretty much for pensions and healthcare benefits for all, state workers across the board and community workers as well. What's your concepts on how to, potentially address that for the individual towns without property taxes, quadrupling, and everybody who doesn't work for the city or town just leave?
As governor, no unfunded mandates. So if something comes to my desk and it's not funded, it gets vetoed. Here's the problem. I mean, they have so many Democrats in the House, they could override the veto. And this gets to how am I going to govern as a lone Republican up on Beacon Hill? And again, I cover this on my website. I don't think Republican governors have done a good enough job in making the case. And here's what I'm going to say. If I get elected governor, it's going to be the common people who vote me in. I'm going to reach across, not the aisle, but Boston Common, and bring common people's ideas and concerns to Beacon Hill. And I want to work with them. If the Democrats want to work with people as opposed to against them, by definition, we'll be working together. They've worked against them with the tech tax and the gas tax. If they don't work with the common people, I'm going to be very specific about this. I'm going to call them out. I'm going to point them out, bill by bill, how they voted against the common people, so that calling them out, pointing them out, they can be voted out. Very simple.
I heard somebody tell me because it's out there, it's not a sexy issue, so they don't want to bring it up in front of the legislature. And I'm saying it's one of the most fundamental things you can do to take care of your population. I was flabbergasted with that response from somebody on the other side of the aisle.
It's funny. We've got a lot of smart people up on Beacon Hill, either in the governor's office or in the legislature. Harvard degrees, well-educated. I've told people, listen, I own my own business. I'm an engineer. But the things I want to bring to Beacon Hill are the things common people have. Common sense. They balance their checkbooks. They live within their means. That's what's missing up at Beacon Hill.
I know.
Common sense. No unfunded mandates.
Yeah, it's just, how do you do that? And something that if they had addressed a decade ago or 15 years ago, and reevaluate pension structures and how to structure it so towns could look 30 years downstream and still be solvent.
Walker's done that. Walker's done that. He addressed, I don't know what particular benefit they were getting, but some state retirees were paying zero for this particular benefit, and he asked them to pay 2%. Pretty reasonable thing. His new book is entitled Unintimidated, and that's what he's done. You have to be unafraid to do it.
Because you're either looking at Detroit or you're looking at the success story that he's had.
Exactly.
Those are your options. So which way you want to go? There's nothing in the kitty at the end of the day, or that there's been a logical way of dealing with these programs going forward so that they're sustainable. And the federal government has the same problem too. They've been.
It's not hard to understand. It's just tough to get it through.
How many of our cities are in trouble?
Oh my goodness, I don't know the answer to that.
They all are.
They all
I don't know if there's any better.
seriously in trouble.
They're impacted by the unfunded mandates. Hit them all.
Everybody's better. We're in better shape than Boston, Burlington. Much better shape.
I've heard that now.
There are problems out there that.
I've lived in my town, Shrewsbury. It was pretty well run for 22 years, and the first time that I can remember, a 2.5 override just got approved. We've done debt exclusions before. This is the first time a 2.5 override was approved.
Do you know what the unfunded mandate is in the town?
I don't.
Yeah. I mean, nobody does. I mean, it was always an issue in the back of my mind, and I know some people here, so I dragged the numbers out of it one day, and I thought, oh my goodness. And I'm thinking Burlington is a very well-run town as well. We've got a lot of good commercial real estate that, helps fund a lot of programs for us. So I didn't think it would be as dramatic as it turned out to be. I realized that that's where we are.
Exactly.
I can only imagine. So even wealthy towns like Winchester, which is
I know someone there who did a lot of
no
trouble.
commercial real estate, so it just.
See the headlines tonight?
In regards to.
Yeah, the Tiers, another piece, they're gonna develop another piece of land, over off Wheeler Road. Anyway, what do you like to do when you're not politicking?
Well, I was in work today. It's been hard juggling things, but I'm an engineer. I like finding out how things work and how to make them better. Tinkering, around the house. Or,
What kind of business is it?
metal fabrication. We don't have a product. We sell our manufacturing services to companies that just do engineering and design.
Sure.
They give us their drawings, and we build the things for them. We do the dirty work for them.
Okay.
Another reason why I'm hoping you're successful is because the same culture of belief in government, that government will take care of us and do it for us. That's seeping down to the towns and cities as well. I know even in Burlington, the regional government goes out a little bit more, and we end up voting for it at town meeting.
Yeah.
Where we should say, wait a minute, we don't need this, we don't have this type of problem here, why do we need new laws, new regulations here in this town? At the same time, budgets are increasing 4.5% every year, minimum. And you talk to some of the people in town government, oh, we couldn't live with anything less than 4.5%. We could not get by. Part of it's going to be salaries, of course, but it's just that belief in government, and we know what's right, and we're going to do what's right for you, whether you want or not, so it doesn't matter. So that's why I'm hoping that we get a real culture change, and
we need it.
beginning at the state level.
I remember when Governor Mitt Romney was in office, he went around to local officials and he said to them, Proposition 2.5 is the law of the land. You have to maintain your expenses within that cap, or you're going to be forced to do overrides and overrides and overrides and overrides. That should be living within your means. If that's the structure you have to live within your means. It makes some hard decisions.
Which most towns are unwilling to do.
Exactly.
Kick the can down the road at the local level and at the federal level, the same thing. Don't worry about a thing.
Do you think social issues will come into play in the election in this cycle, as they usually bubble up?
I'm sure they will, especially in Massachusetts. And again, I address those on my website too. In general, again, I've never run for office before, but I think candidates should be candid. And people should know where you stand on the issues. On the social issues, what I've said is I think things are going to work out in the culture. And I don't like the idea that states, either through their legislature or the judiciary or the executive branch, are imposing certain things. And you have this patchwork of, is it legal here, isn't it legal here? I think it has to work out in the culture, and then we do a constitutional amendment and look at things that way. Strangely enough, Jim Browdy had asked me this question about
It's always a hot button with him.
Abortion or gay marriage, and I said, I hold the same beliefs as Scott Walker in Wisconsin. If you go to his campaign website, he has a tab like I do under issues. But rather than have 13 or 14, he has one. It says that he and his wife are 100% pro-life. And he said, well, Mark, this is Massachusetts, this isn't Wisconsin. And my response was, so what does that mean? That the voters in Massachusetts are less tolerant than those in Wisconsin? I don't think so. They may not agree with me on the issues. The woman who seconded my nomination at the convention is pro-choice. I'm pro-life. So I think people respect other people if they have different views on these things.
Yeah, and quite honestly, it's a frustrating issue to me because it's really not a right or wrong type of thing for a lot of people. It just is, and it's a lot to do with your religious background, how you're brought up. I mean, there's so many different factors. But it always gets thrown out there from the other side, saying and they use it as kind of an anti-women concept, and it's not. And I find that always a little bit frustrating.
Are we losing some of our graduates? Are we losing a reasonable amount, or are we losing a lot of our qualified people, I guess, that
Yeah.
take advantage of our schooling and our medical institutions.
Yeah, I don't know the exact numbers. I know we are because we're not creating jobs here. And so they're getting the education. If they're not job hunting, they're going to follow where the jobs are. New York is almost leading the way. It's number 2 in job creation. They're going to go where the businesses are. By the way, sort of leads into education a little bit. I think that we have told too many kids that success only comes through a college education and all the debt that goes along with it. There are good paying jobs out there for electricians, plumbers, mechanics, welders, and I'm having a hard time finding those kind of guys. One quick story, I went to Worcester Technical School. It's where President Obama gave the commencement address recently.
Right.
I went there, it's about 8 years ago, and I was working for a company, we were looking for 6 machinists. We want to have a co-op program. There was only 1 student in the machining program at Worcester Technical School. No
Wow.
freshmen, no sophomores, 1 junior, no seniors. We've told kids, this isn't the way to go. The path of success is college, and it's going to hurt manufacturing. And some kids are going to college and maybe would have been better off
A
in
lot
a
of them would have
skill
been better off, yeah.
and without all that debt. On the secondary school level, when I was going to school, they called them junior high schools, and we had metal shop and wood shop and
Yes.
home economics and
I
vocational
remember.
skill programs. They're gone. They're gone. If for nothing else, let's give these kids an opportunity to experiment. Where do your talents lie? What do you like to do best? And maybe they won't go down that path. At least give them the opportunity to explore it.
And they make good livings.
They do.
They really do.
Actually, I tried to get my son into college, and he went for 2.5 years, but he's an automotive mechanic. He's doing great. And actually, it was a better skill set for him. Great kid, and he's doing well with it.
Do you know if he had the opportunity when he was going through middle school to maybe experiment in some metal shop, or was it?
Didn't exist.
Didn't exist. Yeah, that's,
Well, photography, those are the kind of things that they, add as alternative
Yeah.
things. In computer class, that's really the evolution from what we dealt with when we were growing up as kids.
How about one last opinion on the recent gun control legislation that just got enacted? Giving policemen discretion whether to
Yeah.
approve licenses.
Massachusetts has some of the strictest gun laws around, and I was against it for the fact that let's not waste our time where I don't think there's a problem. Government incompetence in these areas we talked about earlier, BCAT, the drug scandal, the compounding pharmacy, has been responsible for more harm, injury, and deaths than any law-abiding gun owners.
You're right.
We have some of the strictest gun laws here now. I work at Savage Arms out in Westfield, built my own shotgun. One thing that did result from the new gun laws that is good, they actually made things less strict with regard to pepper spray. Massachusetts was the only state in the country to require an FID card to buy pepper spray. My mom's 83, she had pepper spray, she had to go get an FID card. They removed the restriction on that now, so I'm in favor of that, but not all the other things.
Okay.
By the way, I said, when I went to get my FID card many years ago, I counted the number of laws that were in place then, 98. Any one of which you broke would mean you couldn't own a gun in Massachusetts. So the moral of the story I tell people is if you want a good neighbor, find yourself a law-abiding gun owner because they have to be squeaky clean. They've already been vetted by the police chiefs.
Sounds like good advice. I just wanted to give a little bit of a mention to our next Burlington Town Republican meeting, which is going to be held at the Grandview Farms. That's on September 8th, and we're looking to make it a new member night. We're looking to have a couple candidates. Are you busy that night?
the eve before the election, a little bit busy.
And actually, well, after the election, you'd be willing to come back?
Absolutely,
Great.
as the nominee.
We have a little time left. Do you want to tell the
Audience.
audience why they should vote for you?
Sure. I think Massachusetts has reached the tipping point, and we've elected Republican governors in the past, and we need somebody who's going to provide solutions, common sense solutions to the problems that face Massachusetts. On my website, I list all those areas where I think there are problems in Massachusetts. I provide very clear, concise, conservative solutions. I'd ask your viewers to visit that website, and if they like what they see, I'd ask for their vote on September 9th.
Well, thank you, Mark Fisher. Thank you for your time. Thank you for
having
being
me.
here. And thank you, everyone out there. Thank you for joining us as well. And we'll see you next week, and hopefully, if you can make it to the September 8th. Remember, we finally have a primary for the GOP. That looks very exciting. I know I'm excited. Good night.
Mark, thank you so much for coming. I
Curious,
really
didn't you?
appreciate it.
That was a real pleasure, Mark.
You're on the right track, there's
Let's
no
hope so.
doubt about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think part of the biggest problem is name recognition. There's still a lot of people out there who haven't heard of the campaign or me
Yeah.
or this. It's tough.
My own perception is just this. I mean, I like your, and have for a long time, perspective much more than I like Charlie, not that I dislike Charlie. But name recognition is a concern for me in terms of, wanting to house what is.
Thank you, everyone. We're clear.